So it's lesson 3 of mobile and pervasive computing. We're just going over our little login form. So here was our UI. We added 2 edit texts and a button. We used constraints so that our form's laid out and it works fine when we rotate. But right now our app does nothing. You can type. I also have to click that button to actually see the keyboard, to see the login button. Notice the keyboard hides it. So if I click login, we now need to check that credential and display a message. So what's one way we can do this? How do we enable this? Okay. So we can go to the main activity. Okay, so where should we do that, Amrit? Okay, so in the existing onCreate method of the activity, we could set up a click handler here. Okay. Are you able to do that? Can you tell us what that looks like? Okay, yeah, we will need to use our dot. So yes, we got to do one thing first. Okay, so, and where did, okay, so. We could do it, typically they are initialized. Yep, so we could do it. We could do it up at the top of the class, or we could do it on create. Both would be correct. Typically, standard coding form is the views are typically declared at the class level and then instantiated on create. It doesn't have to be that way. If you did it all in the create or did it all at the class level, that would be fine. So we want to name our views. We had username edit text or email edit text, password edit text, and login button. So we want to declare those at the class level. Now it gives us this error. It doesn't recognize the class. So what do we need to do to fix that? Yeah, so we can import, easiest way, highlight that in red, hit Alt Enter, use the context menu, and yeah, it's going to say, do you want us to import the class necessary to use an edit text here? Steve?
When we've been writing this Java code, we generally use private and declares and getters. That's something that
we will for certain things, but we don't need them for the views. And I'll explain why in a minute. Okay. So if I forget, stop me and ask. It's a good question. Okay. The short answer is no, and I'll give you the longer answer in a minute. Could be. But then we get a second edit text. So this to me is one of the annoying things about native Android, right? We've already put these views in our UI, yet we still have to declare and reference them in our code file. So again, if you compare this to Windows forms, we don't have to do this. Drag 2 text boxes from the Visual Studio Toolbox, drag a button on your Windows form, give those IDs. Well, those IDs are automatically available in your code window, right? The code window automatically knows what those objects are. Not so in Android Studio. Right, same in Java effects. So then we need a button. Notice the button is also, we can expand the imports, right? So it imported edit text. So we can either manually add an import to android.widget.button, or we can use Alt Enter and import the class. So now we've got the classes, we've got the imports we need in order to be able to work with edit text and button object. So Ben, you said you initialized them up here as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to initialize them there, that's fine. Do it in one line, you can do it. As I said, it's probably more common to declare them at the class level and initialize them. Okay, so you initialize them on create. Wait a minute, sorry, didn't call it, I called it. I did call it username, okay. So now we'll instantiate them here. So this is where we use that R syntax, that R class to reference it. So how do we do it? Yeah, the method is we're instantiating it and we're linking our local variable to the actual object in the UI here. So if we build big UIs, we have a million find view by ID statements. This is the traditional kind of the classic way of doing it. It's cumbersome. We talked very briefly last week about this third-party code library called Butterknife that simplifies this process a little bit. Rick mentioned it.
I was curious, when I did this, I kind of followed along with the video, and you before the find view, you casted it as edit text. You used to have to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's most code samples,
Yeah.
you'll see the casting. Typically, they will cast it. It's only in newer versions of Android that you no longer have to cast it. So typically, it would look like this. So you'd still need the cast find view by ID, just returns a generic view class, and you would still have to cast it. So most code samples will show that. I'll maybe just put it out. We'll try it both with and without. We shouldn't see a difference. But if you look at almost any code sample, unless it's relatively new, you won't actually see this. See, now it actually tells us that it's redundant. But that's relatively new. So then we'll do the same with the other two controls. Won't cast this one. Should be fine. Obviously, the other naming convention you see here is that we use the same name, the same ID names, same terms for the IDs. We don't have to. Our variable names don't have to match the IDs in the XML document, but it's a really bad idea to use one set of variables in the Java code and a different set of variables to reference the controls in the XML. Keep them consistent. Whatever naming conventions you use, that would keep it consistent. Now we've got 3 active references to our views. So we still haven't actually written the event handler for the click button. So we're set up references, so these variables are now tied to those views in our activity. Nothing's actually going to happen yet. So if I run this code, hopefully I'll just run it again, make sure we didn't break anything, but still nothing's going to happen when I click login at this point. So no errors, that's good, but there's still no event handler here. So there's a couple ways we could generate this event handler. So can anybody do it in here in the onCreate method? Okay. Yeah, so we could do login button dot. So there's a set on click listener. So that's the method used for me, if I heard you correctly. So we're going to create a new view on click listener. So we're overriding the click method of the login button here. So this isn't the only way to set this up. We'll modify this later. Actually, we'll leave this one alone. We're going to add a second button on once we get this to work. We'll add a reset button on, and we can try writing that event handler through the other method. I want to show you both ways, and somebody we're going to prefer this method, and other people are going to prefer the other way of doing it. So I'll show you both, and you can do it either way. So what happens in here now? I'll maybe just use a couple variables just to make it simple. I'll create a username and password variable, and then we can evaluate it. You said the method we'll call is, right, so if we call get text. Now, ironically, get text doesn't actually return a string. It returns a text editable. So what do we have to do here? You got it. Right, we've got to convert. We've got another difference between, say, a native Android input, text input, and a Visual Studio Windows form text box that automatically has a text property we can access. So we need to do the same with password. So now this should be relatively simple. If this so what do we want to check?
String equals bracket student student.
Yeah, we can also ignore. Sorry. Let's make it not case sensitive on the email. The password we want to be case sensitive. So we will use equals on the password. That's a good suggestion to use equals ignore case. Password is in Pascal case, first letter is capital P. So we can either display the message here, or to make our code a little simpler, I'll maybe add one more variable just for a message. In this case, what should our message say if they've given us student at uc.ca password? Yeah. Is that message will say? We've set up the variable. With post message, which we'll see in a minute, just a little pop-up that appears at the bottom of the display window. Anybody figure out how to successfully show the toast message?
I think so, but like my
Alex, how'd you do it? What goes in here?
I don't know, I literally just had to copy what was. So I did it in the on create, and I just took from the toolbar or an action button.
Okay, we didn't do it on the floating action button.
Yeah, I still have that.
Okay. Anybody else have an idea? Kevin, how'd you do it?
I created a toast.
We used the toast class. Yep. In this case, I We'll use our message variable because it will be either welcome or try again. Long or short, depending on how many seconds you want that message to show. Yep. There's two overloads. Let's see. Well, let's try and read. Cannot resolve. It may be, hang on. It may be we may need to actually name the activity. Yeah. We need to provide the context. So I think this is referring to our button, and the toast has to reference the activity itself. You didn't have yours worked in this? Right, that's why. Because if we write the code within the on-click listener of the button, this is referring to the button, not the activity. Okay? And the toast has to reference the activity itself. What activity are we displaying the toast in the context of? So we'll run this and we'll try it out. Put in a different password first. I can also hit the tab key to jump down, or I can log in. I get this little try again here. We can, the other thing we can do is we can hide the keyboard. When they click the button, the first thing we can do is hide the keyboard. So now if I put in upper password, interesting. Let's see. Okay, I did just type the password wrong. So this is one way of doing it, that we handle everything through the Java code. We set up an on-click listener. In that case, we can't just use this, we need to reference the name of the activity itself. Now, maybe we'll also make it so that when you click the button, before we show the message, we also hide the keyboard because the keyboard is obscuring the message. You can customize the toast messages as well, yes. So maybe first we'll hide the keyboard. To do this, we're going to make a reference to this object. So this is referencing basically the entire current layout that would include the keyboard. Hang on, bear with me for a second. Oh, whoops, sorry, it's this line. Wrong line. We need this one. Confuse myself, sorry. We need this one if we're going to want to use the stack bar. Is this. So it's our password edit text. So on the done action of the password, we want to hide. If we set this action to done, that will make the keyboard go away. So when the user's done in the password box, notice we need to make a reference here. So we'll import this input method editor info. And this should actually hide our keyboard. We can then also try using this snack bar message as well, which normally the keyboard completely hides. So we'll just try that again. So if I change the password, let me just think this isn't working. I expected this to make my keyboard go away. Okay, I'll have to think this through for a minute. Tried this yesterday and it worked fine. If you hit enter with the password, well. Let's see. I'll have to figure out why. Obviously, I've missed something. It's working for a few of you, but not others. Okay, I'll have to think that one through. So until I can figure out the keyboard, we can't use the snack bar because the snack bar is behind the keyboard and we will never see it. So I have to think that one through. So this is probably the most common way to set up your event handlers, to register those in the onCreate method of the activity and do your references here. So if you pick up an Android textbook, you see, watch tutorials online, you're probably more likely to see this style than anything else. There is another way to do it though. So you did a different way. Did you do it? How did you set up your event handler? Okay. All right, so maybe what we'll do is let's add a reset button on here that will clear out the form. And Thomas, you can walk us through setting up the event handler that way. Okay. Let's go back to your activity main. You can do it in either the design or the text view. So let's add one more button. We'll put it beside the login button, so we'll have to change our constraints a little bit on the login button. And we'll call this reset button. So the constraints I want for my reset button, my left is to the right of my login button. So login will be first, reset will be second, right beside it. My top will be to the bottom of password. Bottom will be to the bottom of parent. And right will be to the right of parent. And I'm going to create a new string resource for the text property. So I'll just click on beside the ellipse beside text. I'll add a new string resource called reset with the value of reset. Now I'm gonna just 160. And then I will come back to the question you asked earlier. Thank you for reminding me. So now the right side constraint on our login button we have to change, because our login button, we said the right is to the right of the parent. So our login button layout constraint is no longer right to right of parent. It's going to be, so I'm going to take that out. I'm going to change that to right to left of reset. I think that should fix our constraints. I'll just check and make sure the UI still looks right. And then Steve, I'll come back to your question. Okay, so we've got login on the left and reset to the right of it, vertically aligned in this at the same height. Yeah. Rather than hard coding the text reset on the button, I created a string resource called reset and put it in there. I could hard code it, but Android Studio is going to warn me. It's going to recommend we use string resources. So Steve, I'm going to come back to your question about getters and setters. When we start working with data, when we're defining classes, yes, then we're going to define those classes with properties that have getters and setters. In terms of the views, the UI objects or controls, those, rather than setting them up as properties, those are just variables. They're just instance variables. Right? So we have three, well, we'll have four now. We had three controls or views in our UI. So we just have three local variables, each one that represents one of the views. And instead of get or set, we just use find view by ID to create a reference to that object. So these are not properties with getters and setters. These are just instance variables. Okay. We will use properties and getters and setters when we start having business classes. Okay, but we don't for the actual view controls in the UI. Okay. Okay, so there's what my XML looks like now with the changes to the login button. Whoops, actually, I guess I still have this right to right of constraint. I can take that out because it's now my right is to the left of the login button. I thought I deleted that in my properties window, but I guess I didn't. So the right to right of property is gone. We now have right to left of reset. Reset is to the left of the right side of the login button. And there's my string resource. It says reset. Okay. So we want to set up an event handler. Rather than doing this through Java, we can actually add the click event through, we don't see anything in the XML. This is pure UI code. There's no reference to the click event handler on login button, right? That happens totally in the back end when the activity gets created in that onCreate method of the activity lifecycle. This time we're going to do the opposite. We're actually going to generate a click event handler through the XML. And you can kind of see the difference. There's not a right and a wrong. So I'll walk us through how we do it.
Yeah, you do Android.
Yeah, or you can even just type, if I just type on, I already get that prompt. So, okay. I'll call it reset, which is going to complain. Okay, and there's even do it right through here, right? So we can just do Alt-Enter, and then it gives me the option, hey, do you want to create a reset method in the main activity? So why don't we do it that way, right? So now we've got just a standard method that returns nothing called reset. So our code is lighter from a Java perspective. We don't have to set it up as an event handler because we're already tying it to the on-click in the XML. Okay, so what happens here?
You get your fields, and what you did in the last one.
Yep.
Oh, actually, you got that.
Well, do we need the fields? Do we need to reference them again? Okay. So nothing came up when you hit Alt-Enter? Okay, here's another way you can try it. You can try it. Right. You can also do it this way. If you just type on-click equals, and you can even hit, so we named the method first and then hit Alt-Enter. You can even do it this way, I think. But we can't because I've created that method in the back. But I think you can hit Alt-Enter first, and it'll give you the prompt you want to generate a method. So can we just clear out those two edit texts, or do we need to make references to them first? Right. They're declared at the class level, and they're instantiated on the create method. So we already have active references to those. So we don't need to run those references again. So, yeah, so we'll just run set text. Sorry. We want to set. This is a reset button. So we want to clear them. I don't know what clear composing text does. I'm not sure. Let's try it. Is that the same as? We'll see. So there is there is a benefit of doing this. Obviously, it's much lighter code-wise. Right-click event handlers. Some people don't like this because they don't like that we're now tying event handlers in the back end. They want to basically have completely independent UI and back end code, right? So there isn't a right and there isn't a wrong. You can use either method of writing your event handlers. Okay, that's useful. So let's see. Yeah, I don't think that clear composing text is what we need, so we do need to use text, an empty string. So much lighter code when we write the click handlers in the XML. Or you can even do it through the properties window, I believe. Yeah, so if I go back, to my design view and go to the button, choose one of my buttons. Yeah, here's the on click here. So we could generate event handlers here if we want to. So that's even less coding if you want to use the properties window. It'll just prompt you to give a method name and it will allow you to generate that event, that method in the Java. So there's three different ways you can do this. Experiment, I would say, try using all of them, see which one you like the best. Okay? Probably, I would suggest, this is the most popular method to have it completely separate, where there's no reference at all to anything happening in the back end in the XML. So you'll see this more, doesn't mean it's right or superior to the other methods. Kevin? That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. To use our Google foo to find that out. Could be. There could be that reason. I mean, I certainly see it from I certainly see using the longer method just from kind of a separation of concerns sentiment, that I don't want any references to anything that's happening in the back end in my front end. My XML file purely lays out the design. There's no concern for what happens in terms of behavior. That's, you know, some developers feel really strongly about that model. Others are far more concerned with every character less I can write, the better. Yes, you could do it. That's right. So rather than writing all of this here, we could have created a login method and written that code in there. But we'd still need to set up, you'd still need to add the listener at the very least in the create. And actually, I don't know, we'll get into that today. Sorry. Okay. All right. It's 9 o'clock. So what we'll do, I'll just ask, are there any other questions about this little login screen? I know writing the Java is not going to be an issue for you guys, right? So the good thing is, once we really just need to figure out how we work in the Android context. Once we do that, you guys are off and running. We just need to kind of learn our way around the UI and how the UI is tied in to the back end of things. But in terms of the logic and being able to write things to make this work, all that stuff's going to be easy for you. Okay, so let's spend a few minutes. We can go over the assignment, okay, and I can show you what we're doing. So you've got 2 submission slots. So one is a group submission, so you just need to submit once here, and then your individual submission has there's a separate link for that. So here's what you got to do. So assignment 1 is mostly you planning this out. Okay? You have a couple weeks to do it. So it's due before class in 2 weeks. So 5 o'clock on the Thursday. You have to submit. Again, here's what you need to submit as a group. A private Git repository. By the way, I think everybody knows this by now. I may mention this in week 1. All people, everybody can submit and create unlimited private repositories now on Git for free. You no longer need a student account. Microsoft's just opened this to everybody. So create a private repository. Invite me. There's my GitHub username. Probably everybody knows it by now. Most of you know it by now. You invited me to enough stuff. Okay? Make sure everybody on your team is a collaborator in your repository as well, so you all have access to it. Okay? So just give me a link. Number 2, one thing that you're going to make, and this is going to come out of our meeting with our client next week, is they're formulating content to put in their version of the app, but you're going to need to put that content in a database. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to start talking about databases. We've got a couple of options. One is using SQLite. The other is using Firebase. If we have time to cover both, we will. We may only have time to cover one of those. If I cover both, you can use either one. Okay? But what you'll want to do is you'll need to create some kind of template to give to the farm tech students, right? Rather, you don't want them just emailing you a bunch of random content. You'll have to kind of figure out, even if you're using, those are basically schemaless databases. They're NoSQL, like MongoDB. But you'll still need to give them some kind of useful form as to how they can supply the content to you so that you can either copy and paste or import it into your database. So you'll get a better idea. They're working on the content now, and like I said, they're going to come next week, not with all of the content done, but with at least some sample content for you. So you'll get an idea of, hey, what kind of stuff do we need to store? So I've promised them that each of their groups is going to get a template from one of our groups. No, next week you're going to hear from them what the content is. So then you still have a week to create that template. So you'll submit it to me and you'll also share it with them saying, here's the file we want you to fill out when you have all your content, whether it's a Word document, an Excel file, whatever you want to set it up as, a CSV, something that you think you'll be able to get it into a NoSQL database, preferably without having to copy and paste. Worst comes to worst, you copy and paste the data. So you might want to go and set up your Firebase account and look at what are your options there. How could we import data potentially? You won't have tons and tons of data. It won't be that much. The other thing I want you to do is start to think about and submit some mock-ups, right? Do a rough SketchUp of what might our app look like, right? Because everybody's probably going to look different. Now, I know you're not professional designers, and that's okay, but the idea is I'm getting you to plan out the layout of the activities in the app. So there's a ton of tools here. Some of these are paid. Some of them will give you student licenses. There's a whole bunch of tools for basically doing mobile design concepts. This one was pretty good. I had a look at. It's paid, but I believe, yeah, it's a 15-day trial. Well, you have 13 days. The mock-ups are due in 13 days, so a 15-day trial is going to actually be good enough. You don't have to use these tools. You can use anything you're comfortable with. Yeah, you can use whatever tool. If there's already a kind of a tool you've used before for doing any kind of mocking up or designing, you're comfortable in Photoshop or something, I don't care what you do it in. Just, I want you to think through and have planned out in 2 weeks, these are the activities in the app and this is roughly what they're going to look like. You're not absolutely bound by them. If you start building the app and decide you need to make changes from your mock-ups, that's fine, but I want you to kind of plan it out, right? We don't just start building without having an idea what the final product might look like. So those are the only 3 things. You don't actually have to have written any of the code or built anything, right? This is kind of the planning phase. So that's all you need to do within the next 3 weeks. So you're going to submit the content template to me and share it with your clients, set up Git, and mock up what you want your app to look like. Okay. So that's the group submission. Individually, you need to put in a little description of what did you contribute to the project, okay? And give a mark to the other people in your group out of 5. Did they do their fair share? Are they doing quality work? Okay, those are anonymous, so nobody will see if nobody will know if you give somebody a grade that's low because that's what they've earned. So be honest. Okay, so here's what you're building. This part I've already described, but we can poke around on the site that it's modeled on. So the site we're using is called Pharmacy 5 and 5. So the idea here is they get 5 minutes to do a 5-question quiz on different topics, and basically the quiz will give them feedback. So it will give them a scenario. Patient comes in with these symptoms, they're this age, they have these problems and this medical history, and here's a list of potential prescriptions you might recommend for them. Which is the right proper recommendation. And then afterwards, not only do they get their results, but each of the answers are generally tied to a set of resources. So if they give a certain answer, well, I'd prescribe drug B instead of drug A, and the answer is they really should have prescribed drug A, not only are they going to see the description of why they should have prescribed drug A, there may be some web links giving them background so that they can go and do some more reading about that. I think the progress tracking is probably going to be beyond our scope. I don't know if there's actually a native app for this. I don't know if this is in the app stores or not. Great. So the idea behind this is, was developed at Waterloo's School of Pharmacy. Let me see. I think I have an account here. I'll have to reset my password. I can show it to you after, okay? I would suggest sign up. It's free to sign up so you can go in and see what it's actually like. Sean? Okay, good. Okay. Okay, and okay, in that case, I don't know whether some have them and some don't, or maybe the idea of being able to show resources may just be something that our program wants to have, right? So it's not just showing, hey, you got it wrong. It's, you got it wrong, so here's where you should go so that you can learn more about this.
Are they going to be giving us a bunch of answers and
Yes, so here's what they want. So all of the content in this app, this is useful for them as a study tool, but all the content's coming here. Basically, what they want to be able to do is create their own scenario. So their assignment basically is they need to create scenarios, and then the different groups, they'll pool those all together, and they're going to have a fairly robust kind of set of practice questions that they can use to study, right? So the idea is each of their groups are coming up with scenarios. So they'll come up with questions and answers, and each group, they'll want their content in your version of the app, right? But with the potential to kind of aggregate all of the data together and expand it and add more. So they can use this wherever they are to help prep for that industry exam, because they spend a lot of time studying for it.
Do you want it also given to them to add questions later as well? Do you want to have access?
Not, well, their content definitely will need to reside in a database, okay? And you're going to pull it from, so the questions, the answers, and the result, the feedback that comes from the database that you can.
We're not there yet.
The answer to your question is, we'll see, right? We'll see about time. The first phase will be that you are going to manually put the content in the database you create, SQLite or Firebase, that the app can simply read it and allow them to do a quiz and get results. We'll see where we are time-wise and whether what that might look like in terms of being able to populate it. Whether there's even if there is an admin portal, I would tend to think that's more of a web function, really. If someone's going to sit down and populate that, the easy way to do it would just be use a scaffolding tool, like use .NET MVC or use Express to connect to Firebase and build a simple web portal that way to control and manage it. So I don't think the management of the content will be part of the app. The app is just going to be for the end user. But if we build something cool, well, then to put together a dashboard later is probably something we can figure out.
So if they're doing all their answers and you're saying they have to choose a format to give us the data in, shouldn't we all agree on one together so that everything is like if they're going to use commas, then they solve them?
Good question. For now, I would say no, because each group may have slightly different ideas as to how they think their app should function. They won't all be exact replicas of this. This is just kind of the concept.
I thought they were pooling all their answers.
They may potentially, right? But even then, like if we have 6 different Firebase databases, all with slightly different formats, again, they're schemaless. So it shouldn't be that hard to export. If they say, Sean and you guys did the best job, we want to use your app for everybody, right? They should be able to pull the other stuff. Or if not, you guys will already have the template you gave your students.
No, that's not what I meant.
No, I understand what you mean. It's okay. Build them independently. We'll worry about putting.
No, that's not a
Okay, I'm sorry.
saying there's 6
Yep.
of their group,
Yep.
and they're all writing their data in different formats.
Right.
They're going to give us all to us, try to upload onto one database and all.
No, oh no, sorry. You're only concerned with one group. You've got one partner group. So you're going to tell that, right? You don't have to worry about it. It's like everybody else is on their own. But no, potentially, if we get some really good apps, they may say, we love this app and we want to take all of our content and put everybody's content in there eventually. So for the moment, you guys aren't really, you're not interacting with any of the other groups in the class and they're not interacting with the groups in their own. Okay, so you're just building a standalone, right? So the version you build, it may look different because you're only concerned with, I think there's 24 students in their class. So you're only dealing with 4. You've got 4 of them as your client. And you just deal with them. You don't have to worry about anybody else. Sorry, I didn't quite understand what you're saying, but it makes sense.
They're going to be answering questions that they will.
For the moment, right? But we're building the infrastructure that potentially we could then add other people's content. Okay? So we're doing it on a smaller scale as like a pilot first. And then we'll see what we get. And it's possible we might get 6 awesome apps, right? So then what do? Well, you publish all of them to the Play Store and say, use whichever one you want. Yeah, that's the idea here. You want to see, right? Here's a link. Here's a link to my app on the Play Store, right? Download it, try it out. So basically you're planning, okay? So they're gonna be here. So they're working on their content now. It's not finished, but they're gonna have enough to give you guys ideas as to what are you gonna need in your activities for your app. They don't have to have all the questions, all the answers, all the scenarios done for next week. They just need to have a few so you get the idea of what they want. One other thing, in terms of the mockup, make sure you follow, it does need to follow the material design guidelines. If you want to publish it in the Play Store, it should look like a Google app. So you can use the material palette, use the material icons, etc. Okay, don't make it look like an iPhone app or a BlackBerry app. Okay. For the mockups, just paste them all, just submit. I don't want like a million files. Just put all the visuals in a PDF. Yep. If you want to actually do that, you could. So then you've actually started to have this set up. Yep, absolutely. Take screenshots, paste them into a PDF, no problem. So just set up the project, figure out how you're going to collaborate. There is a tool I think I put up on Blackboard. I know where we are time-wise, that we almost need a break. I'm almost done. Okay, inside of tools and resources, I haven't used this tool myself, But this tool called Flubits, it's a collaboration tool where it kind of helps with collaboration in conjunction with Git. It's a paid product, but students, as long as you sign up with a student, they'll give you 3 private workspaces free, which would be enough to work on the project. So I haven't used it. I've read some good things about it. You may want to check it out. It's free for you. May help in terms of collaborating. So that link is here. Okay, so it's supported by a bunch of IDEs, including Android Studio. So just create an application shell. So set up a project and have it in your repository. It doesn't really have to be functional at this point. Just showing me you're getting started, okay? Create a README file that explains what the app is and what tools you're using for it. And there is a git ignore template for Android Studio. Make sure you use that. Okay. So probably the largest part is the mock-ups, but then your individual contribution and peer evaluation, that's worth almost as much. So you have until Thursday the 7th to submit this part. So I think originally I had said the syllabus says 20%. 20% is too much for this. I had the 3 parts as all 20, 20, 20. So assignment 1 and 3 are 15. And assignment 2, which is the actual build, that's worth 30. Okay, that's worth more. So assignment 2 is basically going to be the build and having a prototype, a proof of concept working. That's for week 10. And then the farm tech students, their semester's over, they're gone. They have a short semester. And then assignment 3 is basically looking at deploying it. So for assignment 2, we basically just need to be able to run it in the emulator. And assignment 3, we'll look at how do we deploy it and actually publish it to the Play Store and get it in there. Okay. Anybody have questions? Yeah? Yeah, probably not. All you can really do is set things up. You can poke around in the 5x5 and get some ideas. You can, but in terms of, yeah, like the design of it and things, you'll probably, like, you may want to show them the material palette next week and talk to them about, you know, like a color scheme, for example, look at some icons and think about kind of layout and look and feel. Yeah, you won't be able to do a lot. So you'll have to do more of this, I think, after you meet with them. But at least I wanted to give you some background so you're not walking in. You already have some idea of what this is going to be, and you can talk specifics next week. And also figure out kind of how you may want to, you may need to communicate with them, with the client at some times. You may have some questions through the process. So I'll set up that you guys can get in touch with each other if you've got questions. Any other questions before we take a break? All right, let's take 20 minutes. We'll come back at 9:40. Do some calculators. It should be one right with Luke. It's okay, you don't have to move away. I just have to respond to this message. Yes.
So for some reason, I heard on the program it doesn't work. Like it just kind of crashes. Like the phone says system error or restart or something. I try it, but nothing happens.
Okay. What if you try running it on an actual? Do you have an Android phone?
I have a Samsung.
Yeah, I thought everyone.
Okay.
Is that Android?
Yep. Anything? Yeah. Do you have a cable to plug it in?
No, I have it. I'm not sure if mine is from my. Well, actually, yeah, it's not. One of the newer.
One of the newer ones.
If you want, I got a tablet and a phone.
Yeah, can we try it? Can we try plugging the tablet in? You have
I
a,
know it works.
Yeah,
I
okay.
uploaded an app.
do you have a cable? I have a cable, but I don't know if the cable, will that cable work for it?
Should. It's old.
Is it an older Samsung?
Yeah.
So let's try.
Okay,
So
so I
let's-
don't know if what that
Try it.
fit. I have just mine looks like now
Yeah, 3.0.
it's a
It's like a big oval if it's a 3.0.
Yeah.
So that won't work on it.
So
but
what
this
if we
one will.
try plugging the tablet in? Thanks, Ben. Try this and try running it directly on the device and let's see if you get the same issue.
because like I do have a charger at home with
Okay.
plug-in.
Well,
Yeah.
this'll help tell us if it's an issue with the Android configuration or just the virtual device.
Yeah, because my computer sucks. But
Okay.
I can't run it. It's just parts.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for letting us give that a shot.
No, it's just the layout's different.
I was just gonna say, do you have paperwork for me? That's okay. That makes two of us. I was here because it was office hours, so I have an hour on Monday of office hours. So yes, I was here.
I'm gonna try and redo this again tonight after.
Sorry, just give me one sec, Steve.
That's my bad.
That's okay. I'm just gotta read this.
Oh, it's not running.
Not exactly.
That's right. I think I just wanted to use it as a password. It was weird. I filled these out for somebody, a couple of these out for somebody else the other day. I actually got a message from the registrar's office. I did signed off on two and Scott did. Emailed us and said, are these really your signatures? Did you guys were questioning about the city? Yes. I did my signature. Yes.
That's what you get. You have to find that. Okay, maybe you. Right? Oh, I'm right.
Yeah. I was told it should run. What was your question?
Right, so there's a really required, because they're not properties, they're actual objects. So we're not, we can't assign values to them. They're full objects that have the full list of properties. So, you know, our button has all of the properties that where we're using getters and setters, those are for a single, right, they represent a single value, first name. Right. First name that can't have a whole host of properties. It just has a single string property, whereas these are objects that have a range of properties. So we don't really use getters and setters.
Yeah, it might be. I mean, when I. It doesn't come up, so. Then it just, it kind of just use my. Yeah. Yeah, you can take a look. You know, we're not doing it. But I just wanted to make sure. See how.
It's just like,
Oh, yeah. And I can't run that. Oh, God. And I'm trying to get back to the coding. Yeah. Yeah. And it's broken. Yeah.
You created a constructor. That constructor requires those objects to be passed.
Oh, yeah.
So that's crashing it. That constructor should come out. I would take that constructor as crashing, we don't need it.
So goodness is.
So what did we?
Okay, so, I'll check my phone and hopefully
If that's the case, just bring your charging cable with you to class.
What's your policy?
Just mention 2 gigabits.
I haven't thought about that, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, it's good. I'm glad to know that now, so at least rather than coming to the table, we'll figure it out.
Bring everyone in. Sorry, I forgot. Right above
I don't have the other.
Also check. Right design. Technology. See how it goes. Yeah. Like, here's the thing. I'm not. Everything goes back. You can do that. Yeah.
Oh, I know. It's in the assignment.
Did he say we can just use whatever you want if we want to? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I was, but I don't know.
Oh, I think
It'd be nice to make it a lot easier.
whatever.
I can. But I'll stay with the actual production. Good bills. My company, I built that. That's very similar. Nice. Oh, so nice. We might be able to use this. Show you guys how they do. We can't use any of the code to install. Check the reaction. Hey, Rich, we can't use React Native for this, can we?
No.
It's actually write Java.
Yep. These days you can teach me React Native.
Fine. I haven't done a lot of it yet, to be honest, but it's React, so it's not too bad. We build a UI using React to the web. But essentially, all the same logic, all the same backend, and then you just switch out.
Actually, I've been helping a guy who he has an Android prototype built in Xamarin, but nice. But he needs a new developer. He fired his developer. They have a pretty decent code base, but iOS isn't ready, and then he needs a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm actually going to post it to LinkedIn and Facebook group. That's with an SQLite backend that he's used. So I got to try to help him. Sorry?
When you posted it?
Probably today. So he wants somebody on, basically just on contract.
There was an email that I got for a 15-day contract.
No, this is something different. Yeah, potentially that's true.
Bouldering. It's climbing like rock climbing. Right. So this is my first time, and I didn't want to do this. So I went up to and then she's like, whoa. Yeah, or no, I'm like, oh, my whole body was part of my rating. Like, literally.
Oh, well, I never stop my videos, so there'll be a big 20-minute gap in today's lesson video. So you'll just want to do a big fast forward. I just threw up a link on Blackboard. This just came up yesterday. Some of you may have seen this. If not, it's an interesting read about how the demand has overwhelmed the supply of computer science, of places for computer science students in university, particularly in the US. So the number of undergrads in 4 years has more than doubled the number of undergrads studying computer science. And then they're also having an issue because faculty, computer science faculty has grown 17%, while enrollment has grown over 100% at the same time. So I put this link up on Blackboard. It's well worth a read. I would recommend having a look at it. Yeah, lots of interesting things in there. All right. Okay, so I did get into my 5 and 5 account. So if you haven't created it, so they've basically got here, so different categories. So for example, cancer, flu vaccine, etc. So we can have a look at what one of these kind of looks like. So here's Josh and the flu. Yeah, so in this case they are. So the questions you get, well, here, this one isn't yes, no.
way to go.
No. So it will give feedback based on the responses, right? So each answer is probably going to have feedback. You want to display feedback, obviously, in different ways, whether they got it correct or not. And then there's probably a log in here somewhere of progress. So again, so the pharmacy tech students, they'll have some ideas about it. Won't necessarily be exactly this, but this kind of gives you an idea. So I would suggest poke around in here so you can come kind of prepared with some informed questions for them. And they're going to have some informed questions for you. I haven't looked. I don't know if this is actually in the Play Store, if there is a native app. I'm just going to check whether they did this or not. I have a feeling it isn't. There is no native app. No. There isn't. So this is web only. So you'll be building the first, as far as we know, the first native app study tool for pharmacy technician students.
Is there a reason that they don't want to use this? This already looks like that.
Yeah, so part of it is in creating the content, creating content in their own scenarios. They're they can only go through this so many times. number one. Number two, there may be scenarios that they feel they need to study that aren't here, right? So they've got no control. You can only go through this assessment and do what's here. So the idea was to build a tool that's more scale. Oh, so here, sorry, here are the resources here. So the resources, rather than being tied to a specific question, it's tied to kind of the context or the category is how they did it. The idea is they want something that's a little more flexible, a little more open-ended, so that they've got the ability to put their own scenarios and content in and potentially go through each other's scenarios as well and be able to kind of evolve that over time. Because the other thing is, this will change, right? You know, new drug comes on the market a year or two from now. Well, if we build a good app, there's the ability to create scenarios around that as well. So they like this, they just kind of would like something of their own. And it wasn't necessarily that it had to be mobile. When I talked to Tony, who's the coordinator of pharmacy tech, she just said, we love this and we use it, but it has its limits. We kind of want our own. Is there any way, like, do you have any students who might be interested in building this? So I pitched it. I said, how would you like it as a native app? I'm teaching an Android class. We could build you an Android app. She said, sure, let's do it that way. If you think an app will work and be able to do this, then let's do it. They didn't, I did.
Well, I don't know, why would they?
The short answer is they didn't. I said, I'm teaching Android in my class, and you guys can build this for your project because their main project for their students for this term, so they're actually on placement, but while they're on placement, they still have an assignment. So their assignment is in effect creating their own versions of the 5 in 5 quizzes. And then they were going to share and use them as self-study in addition to what's here. Right?
People with iPhones.
No, but we have a whole bunch of Android devices, so it's no problem. We've got we've got old Galaxy tablets and old Android phones, so we can give them access.
Are we thinking of scope for this? How many questions?
Well, I mean, the scope, that almost really shouldn't matter because you're just building the infrastructure. So that infrastructure should be designed to hold one question or hold 1,000 questions, right? Well, the scope is basically whatever we feel is manageable, right? So what they may bring to us may be more than we can reasonably build, because basically we've got 6 weeks to build, right? Next week will be week 4, and we want at least a working proof of concept for week 10 when their semester ends. So it's within your right to say, okay, it's cool you wanted like list of different categories, but we're not going to have that layer of complexity, right? We're just going to have individual quizzes, but it won't be categorized. So we'll get a better sense of that. We may have to have some conversation around that after we meet with them next week. Okay? So we do have the power to limit the scope because our time and our resources are limited, right? Normally, the way we can say yes to an increased scope is, yes, we'll do that. This is how much more time we need, and this is how much more money it's going to cost. We don't have that luxury to expand that, so we can limit it as we need to. If you say afterwards, wow, what they're asking for is way beyond what can be done, then we're going to do a simplified version of it. Okay, with the mindset that it may be extensible in the future, given more time. So we've also got some wiggle room between assignment 2 and 3, right? Because assignment 3 is largely about getting the app published, but there's probably some time in there for you to add a little more toward the scope if we need to. We have a few weeks there. All right. So I think you guys have everything you need, should have everything you need in preparation for next week. So they'll be here, I think, so we'll take our break at 9:10 or 9:05 and come back for 9:25, and they're going to come at 9:30. Kevin?
Will we meet with our group?
If one group wants to have a tablet, like is it only for one device, or like are we all choosing one device?
No, I think primarily we should be designing for a phone, but if we're using constraint layout, we probably want to check that it will run on a tablet as well. But you don't need to do a separate design for tablet, so that we have like certain mock-ups for tablet and certain for phone, not necessary. So you can do your mock-ups just for phone. You don't have to mock up tablet view as well. Basically going to be the same. That's fine. Well, we'll focus on phone. There aren't a lot of people roaming around the halls here in the M building studying on Galaxy tablets, right? But everybody's almost certainly got a smartphone. All right. It's a couple things. You guys know I'm not big on PowerPointing you to death, but I do have a few visuals here just to go over a couple things. So we haven't really looked at, these are not my slides, they're from Udacity, but I pulled a few things I think were useful. So we've looked at a couple of the templates when we create an activity. Obviously, Android Studio gives us a whole bunch of templates. We've looked at the empty activity, which gives us nothing. We've looked at the basic activity, which gives us the floating action button in the toolbar. There actually is, I had you manually build a login activity for homework. There's a template for it. I think I mentioned that. There's a settings activity, as well as like a master detail. Might look something like this. So these are a bit more detailed, but this is kind of the idea for your mock-ups. They don't have to be at this level of quality and detail. But a couple things I just wanted to point out. So we know this already. Skip over this, that our activity's got two parts, the XML UI. Haven't really talked about this. I just want to go over it just so you're aware of it. This is kind of a useful slide about the sequence of events of the activity. Right? So we dealt with on create, but we have these other states. So when our activity is visible, it's started, but it can also be stopped. In effect, when we load a new activity that becomes started, so our activities can be paused and resumed. So our devices have a back button. So if we either close, we put a back arrow in our Android app itself, or the user hits the back button on the device, it'll go from paused back to resumed. Okay? And then we can destroy them. We don't typically destroy them. We typically keep them once an activity has been started. There's like a back stack of activities because we've got to be cognizant of that back button. So it's resource intensive to start and stop activities. So if there's a chance a user is going to be going back and forth through different activities, we're most likely just going to let them pause and resume to avoid the overhead of stop and restart. I'll just reference that. This pretty much summarizes what I just described. So activities will often be in a back stack while they're still there. We can go back to resuming them. And also a description of kind of where and when you may want to do. So we'll get into this a bit more, maybe the first part of class next week, where we start using intents. So how we move from one activity to another. We also use intents for doing other things on the device, right? For accessing the internet, accessing the camera, the phone, or something else from within. We use these intention actions to initiate those. So there's also kind of a visual of what that stack will look like. So if we start here, and then we load, and we navigate back, you can see how this goes. So once we go back, so if we load 3 activities in that order, 1, 2, and 3, if we click back at this point, then back again will take us to 1. So 3 will get destroyed at that point. Okay. Much in the same way of how the back button works in your browser, in effect. Also, interestingly, this is probably the most interesting and maybe surprising point, that rotating the device destroys and recreates the activity. So you have to keep that in mind. We have initialization code on create. It's going to run again when the device is rotated. So that has some implications, and we may want to think about what does code go on start, resume, or create, because that's going to get affected if the user rotates the device. Yes, right, because in the case where we have a different layout for tablet, which I think is kind of where your question was about the project, right? If we want to have different layouts, and I think I gave you an example last week, right? In a phone view, maybe we have a slide out menu, but in tablet view, that menu is visible and takes up the left third of the screen all the time. We'd actually have two separate XML files in that case. So yes, it's going to destroy one and create the other one as if the device, or if we switch modes from, if we rotate the device, then it may shift from one layout to a separate XML layout. Okay. Same with language, or if the app gets terminated. So, you go and click the close all button to preserve battery on the phone, and then you go back to the app you just had open, it's going to recreate. It won't restart, but it will recreate that activity. So this kind of collection of all the states, there's a bundle object that at some point we may need to work with. We want to manipulate or reference that kind of backstack. So I'll just leave this up here. Just want to point it out. It's here for your reference, so we get some idea. And we'll get into it a bit more next week as we kind of navigate from activity to activity. Okay. So I wanted to do two things. This one we should be able to do together. We can kind of walk through this one together. And then if we don't have time for this one, then this one you can do through the week at home. Okay, and you can use that discussion board. I'll create another thread for it. So if you have problems or issues, we can post them up there. I guess we can also look at creating a Slack channel for the class if that's easier too. It's just harder to post code to Slack. We're working in Android Studio, and then we got to go to Slack to post it. It's not so easy.
Not necessarily agree. Just copy and paste it, puts it in its own box, and adds the syntax and the coloring and everything.
All right, we can look at doing that too. Doesn't really matter to me. Okay, so we'll create a new solution, and then you can create both of these calculators in the same solution. We'll create two separate activities. Stop my ABD. So I'm going to create a new solution, and I'll just call it calculators, plural. So make a new project with an empty activity as my template. Just kind of accept the defaults here. So here's your UI. So I'll explain what you need. You need an edit text at the top where a user can enter numbers. We need 3 text views, in effect, labels. So Sean, you were mentioning you had labels in your little login. So we'll have 3 labels. One that shows a percentage, one that says tip, and one that says total. 2 text views. So in effect, these are labels as well, right? They just display text. They can't be edited. And this control here is what's known as a seek bar. So the idea here is if we change, so then we'll have, eventually, once we're done our UI, we'll want 2 event handlers. An on-text changed event handler for the text view, and and a separate event handler. So as soon as we slide the seek bar, these three text views update automatically. That percentage and those amounts will calculate if we just take our finger and slide. So we'll build the UI and then we'll code those event handlers together. And we can either create those event handlers in our onCreate, or we can do it from the XML and generate the handlers there. Either will work.
Wait, what were the three text views again? Percent, total, and
So these three are going to change, but those two aren't going to change. Those are just labels in effect. This screenshot's up on Blackboard in lesson 3. You'll find the seek bar under, yes, under widgets. So name your controls as you like. So it'll take a little experimenting to get all the constraints correct. Name your views whatever you like, just give them descriptive names. There, looks perfect. Move some things around. And I'll take another stab at viewing my constraints. We'll see how it looks. Yep, ready to go. Okay, so I want to move these up, and my little label here is hidden. I also want to set up maybe a dimension to make the text size bigger all the way around. All the labels are tiny, so we can set a dimension. So in my text views, we'll set text size. I'm going to create a dimension resource. We'll set them as, we use scale independent pixels for text. We use DP for sizing elements and SP for sizing text. So I'll put that on all of my text views except the amount. My text size is a little bigger, but not much. We still have to deal with our percentage label not showing up. And I think I want to move these things up as well. So my constraints aren't quite where I want them to be. So I'm going to go and increase that dimension in my values dimens. Make it quite a bit bigger. I'll make it 30. Okay, better. We still want this label up here beside the percentage. Okay. Maybe what I'll do with my seek bar, rather than making it a width of 0 dp, I'll create a new resource. Called mount width. I'll create a new dimension resource, and maybe I'll set this as 300 density independent pixels. We'll see how that works. Because I've got my label set to the left. Right. I've got my percentage label set to go to the left side of my seek bar. My seek bar constrained. And its left is to the right of my label. See how that looks. No, I just need to align the tops of them. No. So maybe what I'll do is I have to think about that for a minute. That's interesting. They're both of the same top constraint. They're both constrained to the bottom of my amount edit text. But the tops are not aligned here.
Were you trying to level them?
Yeah, I want my percent up here.
Can't you attack them both at the bottom?
Yeah, I guess the issue is, yes, I assigned, yeah, the bottom was of the label, and here I assigned the seek bar bottom to the top of the text view. So I guess those should be the same. Or I don't need bottom constraints at all. All right, well, we'll try with the bottom constraints. See what happens. Okay. That maybe is better. We take the bottom constraints right out. Yeah, I could add a little padding or margin to the seek bar and push it down a little bit because the tops are aligned rather than the centers being aligned. Sure, so I could add a little padding here or margin, which would push it down. It's a good suggestion, Amrit. So in my seek bar, I'll add some top padding. And I'll create a dimension resource. Maybe try it at 8 dp and we'll see. May have to play with that value a bit.
You would have connected them at the bottom with 0 padding, they should have lined up. You have connected the bottom of the percent sign to the bottom of the seek bar. They should align perfectly with no padding.
I like that idea. Let's try that. Both should work. Okay, so we'll do bottom of seek bar. And the same, the seek bar bottom to the label. You didn't even do that. Okay, yeah, that works. Sure. Okay, and if we want, we can move the tip and total up. If you want, you can leave them where they are. For our purposes, probably good enough. So our UI's basically done. Here's the XML view. So our text is anchored left and right and top to the parent, and it's above the seek bar. The percent text view is anchored left. It's anchored on the right by the it's anchored on the right, top and bottom. Or it's anchored on the right and bottom by the seek bar. Under the top, it's underneath the edit text, amount text. So we need a bunch of initialization code. We're going to need some variables. We'll need variables to track our two inputs, the amount in the text box and the current value of the seek bar. We'll need variables to hold the tip amount and total amount that we want to display. And then we'll need two event handlers, one for handling text change events here, and another for handling seek events. And we'll also want to set out what increments the seek bar runs on it. We'll also want to initialize a default value that when the app loads, we'll initialize it to 15% and then allow the user to slide higher or lower and recalculate as we go.
In there, so the word popped up.
Nothing. It's as soon as I click in, it's native behave. As soon as you click, yeah, in the text box, the keyboard appears. So we'll go to the main activity. So let's declare some variables that we're going to need at the class level. I'm going to declare and set some default values. But we'll initialize the default tip percentage is 15%. We also now need to make references to the views, so the text views and the seek bar, so that we can interact with them in our event handlers. Doesn't really matter whether they're private or I'll do them this way. Text view. Your names don't have to match mine. Whatever IDs you assign to your views, reference those. We'll want to reference those same IDs. And again, we'll need a couple of imports here. So I'll just import references to the Android seek bar widget and text view widgets. So we can initialize the references to all these in our onCreate, right? We'll use find view by ID to tie these variables to the controls in the activity. We'll call find view by ID. We don't need to cast. Actually, a couple other things on the seek bar we might want to set up. A couple other properties. So we'll just instantiate everything. And again, we can generate our event handlers either in Java or we can add them through the XML. Do it that way. Just going to go back to my XML document for a minute and go into design. I want to look at the properties of the seek bar. I think there's a few things we want to set here. So let's set a max. Yep. So how much would it be highest tip percentage we'd want to allow?
200%.
All right. Seeing if there's anything else we want to set here. We may want to set the progress. Well, seeing if there's a default. Give me a second. I'm just going to check my reference on my sample. Let's see here. We can do it in the Java. I'm going to set the progress as 15. I believe that'll give us a default value. You know, I'm not going to use 200 just for now because it's going to make the increments kind of hard to see. Because if the scale's 200, we're not going to notice very much as we drag. So we'll maybe do 30 just for now. So that way our bar will go from 0 to 30. So 15 is in the middle. I'm setting the max to 30 and the progress to 15. So we can see what that looks like. Okay. So it is in the middle because our max is 30. So we probably want this to start out as saying 15. Okay, so first let's deal with changing of the text. So do you want to do it through here? Or do you want to do it through the Java? Create our event handler. Danilo? The Java? All right. So in here on our create, what we want is to add a text change listener. No, this is for the actual text. So as we're typing, as we're adding numbers, we're listening. Right? We'll deal with the seek part after. Now this requires a text watcher object. So we're going to have to create this. So this is a separate object that's used. So we'll need this. So up here, I'm going to create watcher respond new entries in the amount box. Private instance. It doesn't really have to be text. It doesn't have to be private. We're going to create a text watcher object. With basically the same name as the text view it's watching, with the word watcher on the end. We'll declare and instantiate it, and we're going to have to import the class definition. Okay. It can't be instantiated like this. Sorry. So notice we try it, we've solved the reference, but it's more than simple because it's an abstract class. Right. Yours generated the method for you? Excellent. Let's try that. Okay, right, because now it's giving me the implementation of the interface. If I hit enter, we get these 3 overrides. We're not really concerned with before or after, so we'll just leave those as method stubs. But we can write our code in here. So what should happen? What do we want to do whenever the text is changed? We will worry about the calculate part later, but we've got a variable. What do we need to do with, which variable are we concerned with? The bill amount. We need to change. So we need to take the text value in that amount, edit text, and update the bill amount. So if I type a 1, the value is 1, bill amount is 1. If I then add a 2, the value's got to go to 12. So we basically need to interpret the character sequence and then convert that to a number. We're going to take the sequence of characters, which is the first parameter of the text watcher. We convert it to a string and then parse it back to a double. As the user continues to enter digits, our text watcher is firing our text changed event and constantly updating that bill amount with every new character that's added to the text box. So now we can just pass in here our amount edit text watcher. That sets up the listener to handle those text changes. and to store in our variable the current value, current numeric value that's been entered in the text box. So that's the first thing we have to do. We need a semicolon here. So that will go and calculate the current value of the bill amount. We want to do that every time. In a comment, so get currently displayed amount. That's step one. What will we do after? Right. How can display? We'll just call calculate method. And I'll just generate a method called calculate. And we don't want it in the amount text watcher, it's just part of main activity. Or you could write the method first and then call it, doesn't matter. I'm using Android Studio to generate the method stub for me. The first thing we want to do is show the percentage based on the value of the current value of the seek bar. And then we're just doing math. It's pretty simple, right? You perform the two calculations, display the result, the variables, do some data type conversions from doubles to strings, and use set text to stick those values on the labels. Then we'll have to deal with the seek bar event listener as well. Our percent two. Is going to be, the moment it just defaults to 15. 10%. Yes, I did. I'll have to calculate. That would be a good idea. Thank you, Stephen. Actually, sorry, we'll. Right, thank you. Told you what you have is rusty. Later, we'll format it as a percentage. We'll do this for now. We'll need another library, numeric format, import, I believe, in order to pass it as a percentage. Now we should be able to calculate the tip and total amount and display them. So that's set text. What are we going to do in that text view? Again, you may have used a different ID. So we want the tip amount to be displayed here. Well, I guess it would probably make sense to store this in a variable first, because we're then going to need it for the total. We're going to have to do the calculation twice. Let's see. And we can just use, we'll deal with the currency format after. Let's just get the right number showing up first. Then we'll add the two amounts together, render them on the total label. For total text view. Our seek bar won't do anything right now. It's just going to default to 15, but at least we can try it and see if we get the proper amounts showing up. And if we do, then we can add the seek bar change listener as well as the currency formatting and percent formatting. We'll just see how this goes so far. Didn't mean to go out. Again, I think I need to move some things around, but it does, our text change listener does seem to be working. Yeah. So our calculation isn't quite right as well. Yeah, divide by. Right, so our tip amount, right, is too small. We don't need to do the division because it's already divided by 100. It's a percentage. Right, our tip is not set to 15, it's set to 0.15. We can take that out. We probably want to modify our constraints just a little bit. Yeah, we could do it either way. Yeah. Later on, we're going to want to use a wrapping function anyway to format it as a percentage, which will basically take care of that. Not sure why my apply changes isn't working. I'll just rerun it. Our calculations are right. Obviously, my layout isn't quite right. I will need to clean it layout. So our text watcher is handling things properly. Every time we type a new digit or remove a digit, it updates and calculates the values correctly. Seek bar doesn't do anything yet because there is no change listener. So we're going to need to implement a change listener for that control. That will also call calculate. Yep. Yeah. So we needed to create that instance, and we let Android Studio generate the method stubs for that for us. I can't remember. Is there another class in here after our class? Yes, I think there is. Okay. Okay. In that case, see if you can implement the other few things this week. Okay, we'll talk about them beginning of class. So you want, it's an on-change listener for the seek bar. We'll want to implement, and then see if we can handle the currency and percent formatting. No, it is not. Sorry, yes, it is the progress. It is a progress change. Thank you, Will. So the event listener we're looking for the seek bar is progress changed, because it uses progress as the implement. So also try a simple calculator with clear, which is be simple, and the 4 math operators, right? You can use a switch statement to evaluate which operator was picked.
So in the calculator, you want the calculator to do like a number plus a number plus a number minus a number.
I will leave that up to you. That's quite a bit more complicated. Do a simple version. Okay, so it could be that you have to hit equals, like to get a, it doesn't calculate unless you hit equals. It'll just do the last 2 numbers or the last 2 entries. You can make a simple. Okay, there's a few different ways to do it. So the first half of class next week, we can kind of review this stuff. Okay. I will see about setting up a Slack channel, but you can use the discussion board to talk about it. You don't have to do it by yourself, right? Post questions or suggestions about it. We'll look at it at the start of class next week. We'll look a bit at intents, and then our clients are here at 9:30 next week. Okay. And as I said, remember, there's only one class video today with a long 20-minute break. Sorry about that.